You know, we're always told that our intelligence is our greatest weapon, that being the smartest person in the room is the ultimate advantage. But what if I told you the most powerful strategy of all is to make sure everyone thinks you're not smart at all?
I know, it sounds completely backward, right? How could appearing foolish, or maybe a little naive, or even just kind of clueless?
How could that possibly be a source of immense power? Well, to really wrap our heads around this paradox, we have to travel back in time to one of the most incredible scams in American history.
Okay, so picture this. The year is 1872. The famous gold rush is still fresh in everyone's mind, and a brand new fever, a diamond fever, is about to take hold of some of the richest and most powerful men on the planet.
And man, it all happened so fast. First, a mysterious cable announces a huge diamond discovery. Then, these two simple, kind of crusty prospectors, Philip Arnold and John Slack, they lead an expert to a secret spot out in Wyoming. Before you know it, Tiffany himself is confirming the gems are real. Then, the nation's #1 mining expert declares it the richest find in history. The stage was set for a truly unbelievable fortune.
So the financiers, they practically fall over themselves to pay off these two prospectors. They hand them a check for $700,000, which, I mean, that was an absolutely insane amount of money back then to get the rights. They form a new $10 million corporation, and they get ready for the money to just pour in. But when they got back to the site with all their equipment and their crew, ready to start digging up millions, they found nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a single diamond. It was all a fake. They had been taken for everything in what was probably the biggest scam of the century.
So, the big question is how? How did two supposedly simple prospectors manage to fool the most sophisticated businessmen in the world? We're talking Rothschild, Tiffany, the whole bunch. Well, it all boils down to one simple but devastatingly effective principle.
And this gets us right to the heart of it all. Let's call it the deceiver's first commandment: seem dumber than your mark. See, Arnold and Slack didn't just fool their victims. No, they made their victims feel intellectually superior to them. And the second that happened, all their suspicion just melted away.
The actual mechanics of the con were, believe it or not, pretty simple. First, they bought a bunch of cheap, low-grade gems over in Europe. Then, they salted the mine, basically just sprinkling the gems all over the site. Crucially, they played the part of simple, unsophisticated country folk just perfectly. Then, and this is the best part, they used the financier's own money, a $100,000 security deposit, to fly back to Amsterdam, buy even more gems, and salt the mine a second time for that final super skeptical expert.
And this right here shows you where the real genius was. It wasn't the fake mine, it was the performance. These powerful, brilliant men were so convinced of their own smarts and so convinced of the prospector's stupidity that they walked right into the trap. Their own arrogance, their deep-seated need to feel smarter, that was the real weapon used against them.
And this wasn't just some one-off trick. The reason this strategy is so incredibly powerful is because it taps into a really deep and totally universal human weakness, our intellectual vanity.
Most of us, right, we believe our intelligence is this incredible asset we have to show off to get ahead. But the strategic reality is actually the complete opposite. The moment you make somebody else feel smarter than you, you get the real advantage. Suddenly, you're not a threat, you're not a competitor, and their guard just drops completely.
The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer really hit the nail on the head with this one. He basically said that nobody likes to feel less intelligent than the person they're dealing with. It's just this uncomfortable, almost unbearable feeling. So when you deliberately put yourself in that less intelligent role, you make the other person feel comfortable, confident, and, well, careless.
And hey, this isn't just a strategy for con artists. The exact same principle has been used at the highest levels of power, from inside royal courts to the negotiating tables of entire nations.
Just look at the Prussian statesman Otto von Bismarck. Back in 1865, he needed his rival, an Austrian count named Blome, to sign a treaty that was, let's just say, very good for Prussia. Now, Bismarck knew that Blome thought you could judge a man's character by how he played cards. So the night before the big negotiation, Bismarck intentionally played like a reckless, bumbling fool, losing thousands of dollars.
And you know what? It worked like a charm. Blome was so convinced he was dealing with this impulsive, witless opponent that he barely even glanced at the treaty before he signed it. He totally missed the fine print, and just like that, Bismarck won a massive victory for Prussia, all by playing the fool.
So, the real key here is figuring out when and how to use this incredibly powerful strategy. It's a tool that can be used in so many different situations, once you get the hang of it.
There's this amazing ancient Chinese hunting analogy for this. It's called masquerading as a swine to kill the tiger. The idea is that the hunter dresses up like a harmless pig. This makes the tiger feel overconfident, and it lets the hunter get dangerously close before, bam, striking at the last second. You become the harmless prey to fool the powerful predator.
And just think about all the ways you could apply this. You can use it to completely disarm arrogant people who are always underestimating everyone. You can hide your real ambitions while you're trying to gain power. I mean, nobody sees the harmless pig as a threat, right? You can make your rivals feel all sophisticated and smart so they let their guard down. Or, hey, sometimes you can just play the part of the opossum, playing dead, play dumb, just to be left alone and avoid fights you don't.
Okay, but wait. Does this mean you should just always hide your intelligence? Just play the fool 24/7? Well, not exactly. Like any powerful strategy, there's a time and a place for its opposite. This is what we call the reversal. Sometimes, a confident, authoritative, I'm the smartest person here display of intelligence is exactly what you need. Say you've made a mistake, or you need to cover up a little deception. Acting like an unshakable expert can intimidate people into silence. It's a different kind of mask for a different situation.
But in the end, the real wisdom here is all about being in control. As the philosopher Baltasar Gracian put it, he who poses as a fool is not a fool. It's about consciously choosing your mask, not letting a single mask define you. The true power is in knowing when to be the tiger and when to be the swan.
So, as you go about your day, it's worth asking yourself, in the situations you're facing, who's playing the part of the overconfident tiger, and who might just be the swine, patiently waiting for the perfect moment to strike? Okay, so we're about to dive into a strategy that feels, well, completely backward. It's an idea that goes against pretty much every instinct we have when it comes to power and conflict. The idea that when you're at your absolute weakest, the smartest thing you can do isn't to fight back, it's to surrender. You know, when you hear the word surrender, what comes to mind? A white flag, right? Total defeat, humiliation? We're always taught to see it as the absolute end of the road. But what if we've got it all wrong? What if surrendering, when you do it right, is actually one of the most powerful weapons you have?
And this quote right here, this is the core idea that just flips the whole script. See, surrendering isn't about giving up your will. It's about protecting your strength for later. It's recognizing that fighting a losing battle just for honor can be a total trap, one that leads to absolute, catastrophic ruin. Let's see how this plays out in the real world.
So first up, we have a classic cautionary tale. It's a lesson in what happens when your pride completely overrules your strategy, especially when you are facing just impossible odds. It's a pretty tragic story, but man, does it have a powerful lesson for us.
So the scene is set. On one side, you've got this ancient superpower, Athens, just flexing its massive military might. And on the other, the tiny, tiny island of Melos. Super independent, but let's be real, hopelessly outmatched. The choice Athens gave them was brutal, but for the Athenians, hey, it was just business.
And you can just see the two completely different worldviews clashing right here. On the left, there's Athens, operating on pure, cold, unsentimental realism. We're strong, you're weak, that's how it is. But on the right, Milos is betting everything on these abstract ideas, honor, justice, and this hope that their allies, the Spartans, are going to ride in and save the day. They're not just in a military fight, they're in a philosophical one.
And, well, the result is as tragic as it is predictable. The Melians, they refuse the offer, they put all their chips on honor and allies, but as you can see from the timeline, the invasion happens and the Spartans are a no-show. The aftermath is just brutal, total annihilation. Their noble stand, their fight for honor, got them absolutely nothing but their own destruction.
Okay, so that's the steep price of honorable defiance. But what does strategic surrender actually look like? Well, let's fast forward a couple thousand years to a place where the battlefield isn't an island, but a hearing room, and the weapons are in swords and shields, but words.
So the stakes here are incredibly high. The famous playwright Bertolt Brecht, a known Marxist, gets called up before the House Un-American Activities Committee, or HUAC. This was this super powerful government body dead set on finding communists in Hollywood. And openly defying them, which is what his friends did, meant getting blacklisted, your career destroyed, maybe even jail time.
But instead of fighting them on their own turf, Brecht did something totally different. He sized up the situation and realized, oh, these guys want to fight. They're itching for one. So what does he do? Step 2, he outwardly yields. He shows up, he's polite, he's cooperative, he totally disarms them, all while using his words and an interpreter to confuse and basically control the entire hearing.
And here is just a perfect little snapshot of his genius. The committee reads this English translation of one of his revolutionary poems back to him, and this is his response. Now think about that. It's not a lie, but it's so brilliantly slippery that it just baffled them. He was surrendering on the surface, oh, that's not quite my poem, while underneath he was in complete intellectual control.
So, we've seen two stories with two wildly different endings. Now, let's get under the hood and really break down the mechanics. Why is this whole surrender tactic so incredibly powerful when you use it with a little bit of intelligence?
I mean, just look at this contrast. It could not be clearer. The Millennian's defiant stand was met with predictable, crushing force. But Breth's submission, it was met with confusion. His enemies didn't know what to do with a guy who wasn't fighting back, so they just dismissed him. The result? Total annihilation for one and complete freedom. And let's be honest, the last laugh for the other.
You see, the key takeaway here is that yielding is not passive. It is an active, strategic choice, and it has some huge advantages. It buys you time, which is the most precious thing you have, time to recover, to plan. It throws your opponent off because they're geared up for a fight. And most importantly, it preserves your own strength, lulling them into a false sense of security while you just wait for the perfect moment to strike.
And this isn't some one-off trick, you know? History is filled with stories like this. Take King Gojian. He suffered the ultimate humiliation, working in his enemy's stables, like a servant. But he wasn't defeated. Not really. He was gathering intel. He was studying his enemy. He was waiting. And when the time was right, he took back everything he had lost, and more.
So, when we boil this all down, what's the big idea? What's the final takeaway here?
Well, it's really about redefining our whole understanding of what strength and control actually look like.
This right here, this is the secret. The surrender is just for show. It's external. It's a performance. But inside, your will, your goals, your long-term plan, that stuff stays rock solid. By bending on the outside, you literally take away your opponent's target. You neutralize their aggression, which, paradoxically, is what puts you back in control.
And honestly, I don't think there's a better way to sum this all up than with this old Ethiopian proverb. I love this. It's a little crude, it's funny, but it perfectly captures the spirit of this whole strategy. It is the ultimate expression of outward submission, right? The deep bow, but combined with total inward defiance. The Lord sees the bow, feels respected, and moves on. And the peasant? He keeps his dignity and gets to express his true feelings with zero risk. It's perfect.
And that's what we want to leave you with. In a world that's constantly telling you to stand your ground, never give an inch, never back down, maybe the most powerful move is the one nobody ever sees coming. So the next time you find yourself in a tough spot, don't just ask, how can I fight harder? Ask yourself, where's the hidden strength in learning how to bend?
All right, let's jump right in. We're about to unpack a principle of power that is, honestly, timeless. It's what separates the truly successful from everyone else who's just spinning their wheels. It all comes down to one word: concentration. And I'm telling you, learning how to focus your energy, it can completely change the game for you.
But before we get into the nuts and bolts, I've got to ask you something. And yeah, it's going to sound a little weird at first. It comes from this really old fable. The question is this: are you a goose or are you a horse? I know, sounds crazy, right? But just hang with me here, because how you answer that question, it reveals everything about this law of power.
So here's how the story goes. You've got this goose, right? And it's bragging to a horse about how it's just a way better animal. And its reason? It claims it's mastered 3 different elements. You know, it can waddle around on the ground, it can kind of flap its way through the air, and it can float on the water. But the horse just looks at him and says something like, look, you're okay at all 3 of those things, but you're not great at any of them. Me? I do one thing, and I do it incredibly well. People admire me for my speed and my grace on the ground. The point being, he'd rather be a master of one thing than, a clumsy goose in 3. And that little story, it just perfectly nails a fundamental law of power, which is that intensity will always beat extensity. Every single time. Think about it like this. You're going to get so much more value out of finding one single rich gold mine and just digging as deep as you can than you ever will by running around digging 100 shallow holes that have nothing in them.
So this brings us to the law itself, the law of concentration. It's pretty simple, really. You have to conserve your forces, your energies, by keeping them focused right where they're strongest. Just imagine that your energy, your talent, even your attention span, it's a finite resource. You only have so much of it. If you spread it out super thin, it becomes weak, totally ineffective. But if you concentrate it, man, it becomes incredibly, incredibly powerful. Now, to really see this in action, we're going to look at a tale of two completely different strategies. It's a classic contrast. On one side, we've got a massive historical failure, a total collapse caused by spreading way too thin. And on the other, one of the most unbelievable success stories in history built entirely on this idea of cohesion and focus.
Okay, so first up, the failure. Let's go back to ancient China. You have the kingdom of Wu. They're super ambitious, right? They want to be the big dogs, so they decide to conquer the revered Middle Kingdom. They get a few early wins, and they get drunk on that success. So what do? They start fighting wars on multiple fronts at the same time, spreading their armies and resources thinner and thinner. Now, the king's top advisor, a guy named Wu Tzu-Heyu, he sees exactly what's coming. He sees the disaster on the horizon. He goes to the king, he's pleading with him, warning him, hey, we're spreading ourselves way too thin. Our rival Yue is going to see this opening and crush us. But the king, he's blinded by his own ego, his own arrogance. He won't listen. In fact, he gets so angry, he orders his most loyal advisor to commit suicide. And just before he does, Wu Tzu-Heyu says these chilling last words, which turned out to be a terrifyingly accurate prophecy.
Okay, now let's pivot from that absolute train wreck to one of the greatest success stories ever told. I'm talking about the Rothschilds banking family. And they started from literally nothing, in the Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt. And here's the thing, being forced into this segregated community had this unintended side effect. It forced them to become fiercely self-reliant. It made them intensely focused on unity and sticking together. Their power was concentrated from the very start, almost by necessity. The patriarch of the family, a man named Meyer Amschel, he just got this. He understood this power instinctively. So he laid down 3 core rules for his family. Rule number 1, ally yourself with one single powerful patron. Don't spread your services thin, trying to please everybody. Rule 2, trust no one outside the family with the business, period. And rule 3, and this was crucial, make sure his sons stayed completely united, working together to run the business. This was all about preventing their power, their wealth, from ever being diluted.
And you can see here, the family did expand. The 5 sons went out and set up branches in the big financial capitals of Europe, London, Paris, Vienna, Naples, while one stayed behind in Frankfurt. Now, on the surface, this looks like they're breaking the exact rule we're talking about, right? This should have been a complete disaster. It should have diluted their power and torn them apart. But it wasn't. And the reason why is how they managed this expansion. This is where their genius really shines. They counteracted that physical distance with some unbelievable strategies for concentration. I mean, look at this. They built the fastest private courier system in all of Europe, which basically gave them a monopoly on information. They were always one step ahead. They communicated internally in a coded version of Yiddish that was literally uncrackable by outsiders. And this is the most radical part, they kept the wealth and power locked tightly inside the family through strategic intermarriage. We're talking 16 of the first 18 marriages in the family were between first cousins. It was all about keeping that power base solid. So when you put them side by side, the lesson is just crystal clear. The Kingdom of Wu, they chose diffusion. They spread out, they ignored wise advice, and they completely collapsed. The Rothschilds, they chose cohesion. They stuck to their founders' strict, concentrated rules, and they built a financial empire that has lasted for generations. It's a perfect case study.
Okay, so this isn't just some cool story about ancient China or super rich bankers. This principle applies directly to your life right now. So let's switch gears and talk about how you can actually use this power of concentration for yourself. The best way to think about this is the metaphor of an archer's arrow. It's so simple. You cannot hit 2 targets with 1 arrow. It's impossible. If your thoughts stray, if you're looking over there while you're aiming over here, you're gonna miss. To hit the bullseye, your mind and that arrow, they have to become one. That single-mindedness of purpose is what gives you the power to pierce right through to the heart of your goal. So how do you actually do this? Let's break it down into 3 practical keys to power. First, and this is the big one, the most fundamental, concentrate on a single goal. And I mean intensely focus until it is completely achieved. Don't just start it, don't get it halfway done, finish it before you even think about moving on to the next thing. Second, stop trying to please everyone. Instead of spreading your loyalty and your efforts thin, find one single key source of power, a powerful patron, a mentor, a boss who can actually help you. And third, in any situation, any organization, learn to identify the true center of power. I'm not talking about the person with the fancy title on the door. I mean the person who really makes the decisions. And then focus all your efforts on them. Let's dig into that second point about finding a single patron. Take a look at Nikola Tesla, an absolute genius, no question. He was offered a ridiculously rich contract by JP Morgan, but he turned it down because he wanted to preserve his so-called independence. And what happened? He spent the rest of his life struggling, constantly chasing funding from dozens of different people. Now compare that to a writer named Pietro Artino. He attached his powerful pen to one person, the Emperor Charles V. And by doing that, he got all the freedom, all the resources he needed to thrive and create his best work. And this quote from Casanova just nails the psychological power of a concentrated mind. I mean, this guy credited all of his legendary success, from his famous seductions to literally escaping a prison that everyone said was inescapable, to this one single principle. He said he would get so completely, exclusively wrapped up in a single goal that failure just wasn't even an option. It became almost impossible. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. Like any good law of power, there are nuances, there are exceptions, and sometimes the most powerful, most strategic move you can make is to do the exact opposite. So now let's look at the art of dispersion and figure out when you should actually break the rule. So that forces us to ask the question, right? Is just focusing always the answer? And the short answer is no, of course not. Context, as always, is everything. Just think about warfare. If you're a big, strong army, what do? You concentrate your forces. You create overwhelming power at one point to crush the enemy. But what if you're the weaker side? What if you're the guerrilla fighters? For them, concentrating their forces is a death sentence. Their strength comes from the complete opposite, dispersion. Melting into the jungle, being everywhere and nowhere at once, and completely frustrating the bigger, more powerful enemy. And that really highlights the hidden dangers of too much focus. Look, if you tie your entire fate to one single patron, and that person falls from power, guess what? You're going down right with them. If you've got enemies coming at you from all sides, a single concentrated line of defense is just begging to be outflanked and broken. And honestly, on a purely personal level, being too single-minded can make you rigid, predictable, and let's be real, kind of a bore. So the key is to know your own position. Are you the powerful army, or are you the guerrilla fighter? If you're strong and you have a very clear target, yeah, concentrate your forces. But if you're weak, if you're outnumbered, or if you're in a really unpredictable environment, dispersion might just be your greatest strength. It's all about strategic flexibility. And that brings us all the way back to you. The power of concentration is undeniable, it's immense, but you have to apply it with wisdom. You can't hit every target out there. It's just not possible. So when you look at your life, at your goals, at your biggest ambitions, you have to ask yourself, what is my one true target? All right, today we are diving deep into the timeless, and let's be honest, pretty treacherous rules of power. Our guide for this journey? The Master Courtier's Handbook. So let me ask you a kind of weird question. Does your office ever feel like a royal court? Seriously, think about it for a second. Your boss, company politics, that subtle competition between colleagues, doesn't it feel like you're navigating a place with all these unspoken rules and really high stakes? Well, you might not be that far off. You know, the famous political thinker Machiavelli pointed this out centuries ago. People always want to believe, oh, things are different now, we've evolved. But have we really? Machiavelli said, nope. The stage looks different, sure. The costumes have definitely changed. But the game of power and the people playing it, it's all remarkably the same. And that really gets to the heart of it. A court isn't just an old building with a king and queen. It's a pattern. Wherever you have a powerful person, a court just naturally forms around them. This isn't ancient history, it's just how we humans operate. Even today. Okay, look at this. The parallels are just perfect, aren't they? Back then, the king was the center of everyone's universe. Today, it's the CEO, or maybe just your direct boss. Courtiers were constantly jockeying for royal favor. We're jockeying for a promotion or just some recognition. And yeah, okay, getting fired is way better than getting your head chopped off, I'll give you that. But that fear of making one wrong move, that feeling in the pit of your stomach, that is exactly the same. So this is the tightrope you have to walk every single day. It's this insane balancing act. You have to please the master, but not too much, or you look like a sycophant. You have to stand out, but not so far that you cast a shadow on them. It is a really dangerous, really delicate dance. And because it's such a dangerous dance, a lot of people fall. So let's talk about what not to do. We're going to look at what we'll call the fool's path, 3 fatal mistakes that have been sinking ambitious people for centuries. These are the traps you have got to avoid. First up, a classic blunder, speaking the naked truth. It's this naive idea that your boss actually wants your completely unfiltered, brutally honest opinion. In a power structure like this, raw, unadorned truth is almost never welcome. It isn't seen as helpful, it's seen as a personal attack. And here's the perfect and pretty tragic example. The great philosopher Aristotle gets his student, Callisthenes, a dream job advising Alexander the Great. But Callisthenes, he thinks all this courtier stuff is just silly. He's a philosopher. He's all about pure truth. So he just speaks his mind to Alexander, openly criticizing him. And, well, he learned pretty quickly that even the most enlightened ruler on earth does not appreciate being publicly critiqued. Alexander had him executed. The lesson? Raw honesty in the court is a fool's game. Period. Okay, fatal mistake number 2. This one's a big one. Joking about your boss's appearance or their personal taste. I mean, these are just absolute minefields. You think you're making a harmless little joke, but to them it's a huge insult, and the fallout can be, well, devastating. Just look at the story of Beau Brummel. This guy was literally the king of fashion, the ultimate authority on style, and his biggest patron was the Prince of Wales. But Brummel got a little too comfortable. He started making jokes about the prince's weight, calling him Big Ben. Can you even imagine? And then, at a dinner party, the service is slow, and Brummel just casually says, "Do ring Big Ben." The prince was mortified. He had Brummel thrown out that night and cut him off completely. And just like that, the most fashionable man in Europe died broke and alone. His entire life destroyed by one stupid joke. All right, the third and final mistake on the fool's path. And this one might sound a little counterintuitive. It's the idea that doing more than your job will earn you praise. You'd think that's a good thing, right? Being proactive. But nope, it often does the exact opposite. When you get initiative on stuff that isn't yours, it doesn't look like you're a go-getter. It looks like you're overstepping, like you think you know better. It breeds suspicion, not gratitude. This ancient Chinese story is chilling. Seriously. So, a ruler falls asleep in the garden. The crown keeper sees that his master is cold and kindly puts a coat over him. A nice gesture, right? Wrong. When the ruler wakes up, he first punishes the official coat keeper for not doing his job, and then he has the helpful crown keeper beheaded. For what? For doing a job that wasn't his. The message is brutal and crystal clear. Do your job, and only your job. Okay, so that's how you fail. Spectacularly. But enough about the fools, right? What about the people who actually win this game? Let's switch gears and walk the master's path. We're going to look at the strategies of the real pros, the ones who played the game with absolute genius. So here's the problem. Your boss, in this case the emperor, is messing up. Big time. But if you tell him that directly, you're dead. So what do? Well, ancient Chinese courtiers had this absolutely brilliant workaround. They couldn't say, "You're wrong," so instead they just write these really weird things into the official records. Like, "Today, a flock of geese was seen flying backward," or "A 2-headed sheep was born in the western province." The emperor would read these unusual events and get the message. He'd think, "Whoa, my actions are throwing the whole universe out of whack." And he'd correct his course, all without a single courtier having to risk their neck. It's criticism without a critic. Okay, this next move is all about playing to your master's ego. Check this out. The architect Jules Mansart was a master at this. He's presenting plans to the super vain King Louis XIV. What does he do? He deliberately puts a tiny, easy-to-fix mistake in the blueprints. Of course, the king finds the flaw and suggests how to fix it. And then Mansart just erupts with praise. "Your Majesty, you are a genius. Your eye is incredible." He makes the king feel like the brilliant one. And the result? Mansart became the king's absolute favorite architect. Not for being flawless, but for making the king feel like the true genius. Now this is some next level stuff. What happens when you have 2 powerful bosses and they both want to be number 1? The painter Isabey faced this exact problem. After Napoleon was defeated, he had to paint this huge picture of all the European leaders. 2 of the biggest egos in the room, Talleyrand of France and the Duke of Wellington of England, both demanded to be the center of the painting. An impossible situation, right? Isabey's solution was brilliant. He painted Wellington entering the room, so all the figures in the painting are looking at him. Boom, he's the clear center of attention. At the exact same time, he placed Talleyrand in the physical center of the canvas. Both men were satisfied, their egos were happy, and a diplomatic crisis was avoided. Pure genius.
So we've seen the path to failure and the path to success. But there is one final crucial warning. This is maybe the most important rule of all. The entire art of the courtier relies on subtlety. The moment your methods are exposed, the game is over. And even the best of the best can screw this up. The great master Talleyrand learned this the hard way. He was trying to amuse his master, Napoleon, by setting up a boar hunt in a Paris park. By secretly buying a giant pig from the market, Napoleon was thrilled until an aide pointed out it was just a pig. Napoleon was humiliated and furious. So to make up for it, Talleyrand quickly arranged a rabbit hunt, buying dozens of tame rabbits. Napoleon's mood improved as he shot them all, until the same aide revealed that these too were not wild. The trick was exposed. Napoleon was doubly humiliated, and his trust in his most valuable minister was shattered for months. And that's really the perfect way to think about it. A master courtier is like a magician. Their success depends on creating illusions, on playing with appearances. They let people see only what they want them to see. And we are dazzled by the magic. But if we see the hidden wires and the trapdoors, if the trick is revealed, the magician is no longer a wonder. They're just a cheat, a loathsome rogue. So this is the ultimate law, the number one rule. Whatever you do, however clever your strategy is, you must never let people see the gears turning. Your grace, your talent, your influence, it all has to look natural and effortless. Never, ever let them see your devices. And that brings us right back to where we started. Back to your office, your career, your own modern court. Are your moves subtle enough? Are your intentions hidden? Or are your tricks a little too obvious? It's really something to think about, because the one person you absolutely can't afford to let see your devices is the one with all the power. All right, let's dive right in. We're about to take a really common piece of advice, one you've heard a million times, and completely turn it on its head. And we're going to explore a way more powerful alternative. You've heard it your whole life, right? Just be yourself. But what if that's actually bad advice? I mean, what if it just kind of locks you into a role that maybe you never even chose for yourself? What if the real key to power, to freedom, isn't about finding yourself, but about creating yourself? Okay, so this is the core idea, and this quote just nails it. Do not accept the roles that society foists on you. Recreate yourself. Think about that. It means your life isn't just some pre-written script that you have to follow. No way. It's about grabbing the pen and becoming the writer, the director, and the star of your own show. And to really see how this works in practice, let's look at a couple of people who were absolute masters at this. So, first up, Julius Caesar. Now, we all think of him as, a general, a dictator. But before all that, he was something else. He was a master of political theater. See, Caesar understood something fundamental. Power is a performance. From the moment he stepped into public life, he knew that to win over the people of Rome, he couldn't just be a good governor. He had to put on a show. He got that people, the masses, they respond to big, grand gestures, to spectacle. And he used that insight to build a power base that was pretty much unshakable. And you've got to understand, none of this was an accident. Caesar was incredibly deliberate. Those gladiator shows, they weren't just for fun. They made him a public hero. When he went into battle, he made sure he was on the strongest horse, fighting right in the middle of everything, making sure all eyes were on him. Even that famous laurel wreath, that was a calculated move. It helped hide the fact that he was going bald. Literally every single move he made was designed for maximum dramatic effect. I mean, his whole career was one giant performance. Crossing the Rubicon, that wasn't just some military decision. He staged it like a scene from a play, dropping the famous line, "The die is cast." Bringing Cleopatra to Rome, pure spectacle, designed to dazzle everyone. And his death, even his final words were like a perfectly scripted line, making sure his exit was just as memorable as his entire life. Okay, so this whole idea isn't just for building empires, right? It can also be this incredibly powerful tool for liberation. And for that, I want you to meet Aurore Dudevant. She was a 19th century woman who looked at the tiny role society had written for her and said, "Nope, not for me." And you have to get what she was up against. For a woman with literary ambitions back then, this was the reality. When she moved to Paris to become a writer, this is literally what an editor told her. Society had a script for her, and famous author was definitely not in the cast list. So, what did she do? She decided to write a whole new script for herself. She invented a whole new person, George Sand. See, as Aurore, she was stuck,
confined. But as George Sand, she wore men's clothes, she smoked cigars, and she walked right into the exclusive male-dominated worlds of art and literature. And she didn't just join their conversations, she dominated them. And let's be clear, this wasn't about her wanting to be a man. It was about her wanting the freedom and the power that, back then, only men were allowed to have. So George Sand was basically a strategic creation. It was like a costume she could put on to move through the world. It protected her private self, while her public creation took center stage and commanded everyone's attention. And through this persona, she took control of everything: her image, her career, and ultimately her own destiny. Okay, so we've seen a general and an author use this idea of self-creation to totally change their lives. So the big question is, how can we apply this? Well, it really boils down to a two-step process for becoming the artist of your own life. Step 1 is all about self-consciousness. You have to realize that you're kind of always on a stage. Once you get that, you can become a conscious actor, controlling how you present yourself instead of just reacting to things. Then, step 2, you create your character. A great example is Abraham Lincoln. He very carefully crafted this image of homespun, honest Abe to win over the entire nation. It's all about consciously shaping how people see you. But look, creating the character, that's really just the beginning. If you want to truly captivate your audience, you've got to master the techniques of the stage. Take FDR, for instance. He was a master of suspense. He stayed totally silent before his inauguration, building up all this anxiety, which made his 100 Days plan feel that much more explosive when he finally revealed it. We already talked about Caesar using the beau geste, that big symbolic gesture when he crossed the Rubicon. And then sometimes, as the amazing actor Richard Burton proved, the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. Just stand perfectly still. It's a way to command attention by not moving when everyone else is. All right, this brings us to what you might call the final boss level of self-creation. This is where you move beyond just having one new role and become something way more fluid and way more powerful. The perfect metaphor for this is the Greek sea god Proteus. Now, his real power wasn't in being a lion or a snake or a tree. His power was his ability to become anything the moment required. You could never capture him because you could never define what he was. And this is so important. This is the key takeaway. The goal isn't to create one new fixed mask that you wear all the time. No, it's about developing the flexibility to adapt to any situation. It's about having the power to be a scholar when you're with scholars, or a leader when you're with leaders, to be whatever the moment demands of you. The strategist Baltasar Gracian put it perfectly. He said, "Know how to be all things to all men. Adopt yourself." And again, this isn't about being fake or deceitful. It's about masterful adaptation. It's about having the social intelligence to understand what a situation calls for and then shaping yourself to meet that need. So when it all comes down to it, by taking control of your own image, by learning to play the different roles that life throws at you, you stop being just a character in someone else's play. You become the artist, and your life becomes your masterpiece. So I'm going to leave you with this question. If you aren't some fixed, finished thing, if you're a work in progress, and you are holding the tools of creation right now, in your own hands, who are you going to create today?